Welcome, Taffers. I'm Chububba01, and in this video I'm going to give a spoilery run-through and a quick review of one of my all-time favorite video game franchises, Thief. Specifically in this video, the game Thief Gold. I'm a longtime fan of the Thief series, well, most of it, going all the way back to the first game, Thief the Dark Project in 1997. It was a first-person game, but not a shooter, which was rare. In fact, they attempted to coin the phrase first-person sneaker to describe Thief, but that didn't catch on. The game was slow to gain popularity, but it did eventually, and a sequel began development. At the same time, the game developer, Looking Glass Studios, was listening to some fans say that there were too many zombies and supernatural stuff in the game, and not enough thieving. So, Thief was re-released in 1999 under the name Thief Gold, which had a lot of bug fixes, changes in enemies and their placement, and the addition of 3 new massive levels. And this spread out some of the zombie levels and changed the flow of the game. I didn't mind, but some fans hated the change. For me, I do tend to blur the two games together in my mind, because at times they are literally the same game, and other times they're not. So I am going to apologize now if I switch back and forth about talking about the Dark Project and Thief Gold. But Thief Gold is what I recently played. So what is Thief about? Well, you could watch my playthrough of the whole game right here and find out, complete with a mostly accurate history of the franchise in Episode 0. Or keep following along here. It's about an orphan named Garrett, who is chosen by a group of creepers called the Keepers, hey, that rhymes, based on his already exceptional pickpocketing skill. Garrett grows up with the Keepers and learns their stealthy ways of hiding around town and documenting everything that happens. As Garrett gets older, he becomes bored of this life and realizes he could use his super stealthy skills to fatten his wallet.
The Keepers were training me to be one of them, but I found other uses for those skills.
Eventually, Garrett takes a job stealing an evil talking gem from a haunted cathedral.
Comes a man to rescue me. Poor man.
In return for a retirement-worthy payday. When that is finally achieved, he realizes a little too late that the customer that wants the talking gem is a powerful being called the Trickster, aka the Devil, and he wants to use the gem to cover the world in darkness and send mankind back to more primitive times. This little mistake didn't cost Garrett any money, just his right eye. These turn of events force Garrett to team up with the Hammerites, some religious fanatics that Garrett has already robbed a couple of times in the game. After rescuing the Hammer's leader from the Trickster's forces, it is finally up to Garrett to covertly plant explosives under the Trickster's nose and blow him up. I remember back in '99 getting this game and immediately being intrigued. It slid along the line of horror game and fantasy game. It had a heavy suspense factor that often left me holding my breath. The difficulty settings were also different: normal, hard, and expert. Where was my faithful easy setting? Increasing difficulty does several things. Adds more objectives, requires you to return to your starting point to finish, increases the perception range of the enemies, their speed, and sometimes changes the locations and types of enemies. Some missions required you to steal certain amounts of loot, and that also increased with the difficulty. Some missions limited the number of people you could kill, like 0. Oh, and let's not forget the massive change in your total health in a mission going from normal to expert. So what is so good about this game? It's one of the first games that relied on 100% stealth. The level designs allow the players to create strategic spots of darkness to wait or hide in. Yes, I know about the Metal Gear franchise, but up to that point, Metal Gear had some stealth elements and wasn't 100% stealth. In Thief, you were almost forced to use stealth since Garrett wasn't much of a sword fighter, and getting into a sword fight left you with low odds of survival. Another thing that stood out about this game was the sound design. Sound plays a huge part in the game. Whether or not your character makes noise on certain flooring, using sound to distract enemies, or hearing enemies walking or talking in the distance, and whether they heard you.
Something move there?
That's the last time I jump for rats. Come back here and fight!
You often feel like you're relying on your ears as much or more than your eyes to stay undetected and alive. Under all the sound effects would be suspenseful music, not a score, but ambient music, often pulsing to increase the tension. All that said about sound, my favorite sound might be the lockpicks. I always thought there was something very satisfying about the way they click around. And a close second would be the thwacks of the blackjack. What's a blackjack? In the game, it's a non-lethal weapon that lets you bonk someone in the back of the head to knock them out. In actual gameplay, though, you could hit them in the butt or just about anywhere and knock them out if they didn't know you were there. It was most amusing to knock out people that were already sleeping, as they would immediately wake up and then pass right back out. Another thing that this game excelled at was world building. It was somewhat inspired by a book called The Name of the Rose, which I never read. But Thief is a world where magic and steampunk-level technology coexist. For instance, streetlights clearly have some sort of magical element to them, yet some places have steam-generated electricity. Some of your gear even has magical elements to it as well. A lot of attention in the game is focused on the people, or the people groups in the game, and their importance to the story. There are clear factions and social structures within the city you live. The Keepers, that very few know about. The Hammerites, that are the local religious organization, and they operate as the law. The pagans that worship the trickster and nature. The mages who study magic, and of course the extremely wealthy, the one-percenters, that Garrett uses to pay his rent.
I guess it was nothing.
Besides all that world building, I think my favorite parts of the game were the intro cutscenes to each level. Each one began with a quote from a text that belonged to the Hammers, the Keepers, or the Pagans, and almost all of them set an edge-of-your-seat creepy tone for the level you are fixing to play, as well as give insight about the different factions, their motivations, and prophecies around Garrett. The text quote would be followed by a mission briefing that was almost always sepia-toned drawings moved at unusual angles towards the camera.
Job planned for this evening.
The art and accompanying voiceover also contributed to the suspense of the upcoming mission. And it usually conveyed just how B.A. Garrett was, or at least thought he was. Unfortunately, these intro cutscenes went away after Thief 2.
A bit of burglary.
I would be neglectful to mention at this point that my love of this game is heavily influenced by my great love of its sequel, Thief 2: The Metal Age, which I consider to be the pinnacle of this series. The events of the first Thief games lead to the events of the second. While the story is not as strong, the gameplay is mind-blowingly good. You can learn even more about the world just by hiding in the dark and eavesdropping on conversations between the NPCs.
Yorick tells me the Hammers are gonna close down Craig's Bluff.
Yeah, he's tapping you. Where are they gonna put the poor saps they grab?
Dunno. Toss them into a well or something. Anyhow, they just don't have enough guys no more.
Kinda sad. Used to be the power. Now they're just a bunch of guys wishing for the old days.
Sometimes you learn valuable information, other times it's just for laughs.
The Sir could really beef up security some.
What do you mean? What's wrong with us?
Well, we're fine. But I've been thinking we should watch the outsides more.
That's stupid. People to worry about there on the inside.
No, then you catch them before they get inside, you Taffer.
Oh!
Another thing that drew me into this game 23 plus years ago was the protagonist. This was the first time I had played a game where the main character was an anti-hero. I didn't even know what an anti-hero was. I knew this guy, Garrett, was selfish and greedy.
Greed shall be your undoing, poor Garrett.
And his greed brought about unintended death and destruction. And then Garrett took responsibility for his actions and tried to right his wrongs by attempting the impossible. I guess that hit a nerve. We all screw up, but not everyone owns up to it and tries to make it right. Take that for whatever it's worth. Does this game have flaws? Of course. Let's start with the graphics. Even upon the release of Thief the Dark Project, the graphics were already behind the times. The game ran an 8-bit color palette, which means each mission was made from only 256 colors. They could and did change which colors made up the 256 from mission to mission, but most other video games had already made the move to a more realistic 16-bit color palette, which is around 65,000 different colors. If you don't understand, look at these pictures. If you still don't get why it's a big deal, imagine you had to create an immersive world and you could only choose 256 colors. Then you have the textures, the images that make a brick wall look like a brick. With only 256 colors to choose from, it severely limits what things look like. I've heard, "Is that Minecraft?" a lot in the last couple months. And that's a fair question. I remember first seeing Minecraft for the first time and wondered if it was made in the 90s. And of course Thief was made in the 90s, so that's a pretty logical assumption. Minecraft uses 24-bit color, by the way, which is around 16 million colors. Every level has an in-game map you can reference. However, I found them to be mostly useless or completely useless. Part of the map will be blue, indicating the general area you are in, but never a specific location. And most of the maps themselves are like very, very general. You can hear me whine about them on almost every video of my walkthrough. However, Looking Glass knew about this problem, and the maps were greatly updated for Thief 2. Some of the missions are easier than others. The final mission is surprisingly easy. But the hardest, most difficult, confusing, frustrating level for me is one of the new ones for Thief Gold. Mission 5, Thieves Guild, is a giant underground maze combined with a key hunt and unclear directions that you're supposed to follow in-game, assuming you come across them in the right order in-game, or even make sense of them. To make matters worse, it is possibly the largest map in the entire game, so there are plenty of opportunities to get lost, confused, and rage quit. I'm sure there's story loopholes as well as logic loopholes, but I don't care. In this game, you get to play a mashup of Batman and Robin Hood, sneak around unnoticed, steal stuff, fight zombies, and take on the devil. What more do you want in the late 90s? Nothing. Thief broke new ground for stealth games, set the bar, and became the model future games would look to for stealth-related gameplay. Keep an eye out for this game on your favorite PC gaming platforms. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't on sale or even free a few times a year. Plus, there are a zillion fan-made mods and maps for the game that will keep you busy for hours and hours. And for what it's worth, the 2014 version of Thief, also known as Thief 4, also known as Thief 4, is a hard pass. No thanks. The first 3 games are all you need to tell an amazing tale of a reluctant hero, magic, and destiny. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.